They say if you're always available, you're always needed. And for a long time, I believed that. I believed that being the first to respond, the last to leave, and the guy who never missed a single Slack ping made me indispensable. My world, Silicon Valley, where startups rise and fall overnight, being everywhere at once felt like the only way to survive. My name is Elijah Tran. I'm 32 years old, and for the last 4 years, I've been the co-founder of a crypto-based fintech startup. We were hot. We made Forbes' 30 under 30. Investors loved us. TechCrunch ran a glowing piece that called me Silicon Valley's quiet genius quiet. That part was ironic because in truth, I was never quiet. My phone buzzed 24/7. I answered emails at 2 a.m. I gave interviews, mentored interns, posted threads, filmed, pitched videos, attended every event I was invited to, even when I had no voice left. People praised my grind. But I didn't realize that my availability wasn't building admiration. It was draining my presence. I didn't notice it at first, but the signs were there. One night after a 14-hour coding sprint, I came home to find a note from Maya, my girlfriend of 2 years. It said, "You're always there but never present. I can't do this anymore." She was gone. No fight, no screaming match, just gone. That's the first time I felt it, that weird hollow sound. Silence makes when you realize you gave everyone your time but forgot to give yourself any. Still, I brushed it off. Breakups happen. I told myself I'd bounce back, that I didn't have time to fall apart. I had an investor breakfast the next morning, then a podcast interview, then a fireside chat, then another all-nighter, then nothing. It happened on a Tuesday after 10:47 a.m. and we were in a boardroom in Palo Alto, pitch decks on the screen, coffee cups half full, and venture capitalists glaring with bored eyes. I was halfway through a demo when I started to feel dizzy. My hands shook, my throat tightened. I don't remember hitting the floor, but I do remember waking up to Dylan, my co-founder, kneeling next to me, whispering, "Dude, you passed out. You just collapsed." An ambulance was called. My blood pressure was off the charts. The paramedics asked if I'd eaten. I couldn't remember. They asked when I last slept more than 5 hours. I said, "Last month." One of them laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. That day in the ER, I stared at the ceiling and thought, how did I get here? I had a 7-figure equity stake, a Wall Street Journal, quote framed in my office, VC firms who name-dropped me in panels. But I felt empty, like I was only alive if someone needed something from me. Over-accessibility. That word kept playing on loop in my mind, like some kind of glitch in the matrix. Over-accessibility. I had been too available for everyone, for everything. And in the process, I'd gone missing from myself. A week later, I tried to take a break. I really did. I turned off push notifications, put my phone on silent, sat in my downtown San Francisco apartment, and stared out the window. But the silence was deafening. I didn't know how to be without someone messaging me, without someone asking for my input, my login, my opinion. I realized I was addicted. Not to fame, not even to success, but to being wanted. That was the real trap. A mentor once told me, when you're always within reach, people stop reaching for you. At the time, I thought it was poetic nonsense, but now I saw the truth in it. People stopped calling unless they needed something. "Hey man, can you look over this deck? Elijah, can you intro me to your VC guy, bro? I need a quick favor." No one asked how I was doing, and I realized maybe they never had. The final straw came at a private dinner with a few investors and partners. Everyone was laughing, drinking bourbon, talking crypto predictions. I sat there blinking slowly, my face frozen in that performative half smile. I couldn't hear a word they said. In my mind, I kept repeating, "You're not a person. You're a product, a service line, open 24/7. When I got home that night, I stood in the dark for a long time. No music, no lights. Just me and my thoughts. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. 12 DMs, 4 story mentions, 7 missed calls, and not one of them felt real. I deleted the app, then Twitter, then Slack. I unplugged the charging cord, watched the screen go black, and placed the phone face down. That was the first moment of real peace I'd felt in years. But peace isn't comfortable at first. Peace, when you've lived in noise, feels like withdrawal. It was like quitting a drug, the kind that keeps you running but never lets you rest. I couldn't sleep that night. My heart raced, even though nothing was happening. But I held on because I knew something had to change. I didn't know what yet, but I knew that the version of me who said yes to everything was disappearing. And honestly, that was the first time I felt alive. When the knife comes from someone you trust, it doesn't just cut it, shatters. I still remember the day it happened down to the second. It was a Thursday mid-morning. The air outside was soft and overcast, the kind that makes you think the world might be giving you a break. I hadn't gone into the office that day. I was really trying to stay off the grid. I'd made it almost 2 weeks without tweeting no meetings, no interviews. I'd even told Dylan I needed time to think. Space to breathe, he said. Take all the time you need, man. I've got things covered. I believed him. I shouldn't have. The alert came from a friend, a text, "Yo, are you watching CNBC right now?" I replied. "No, why?" Then he sent the link, a live interview, Dylan. My co-founder, the guy I started everything with, was sitting across from a host I recognized. A tech segment on funding fraud, apparently. At first I thought maybe he was defending us. Maybe he was handling some rumor before it got out of control. But then I heard the words. There were internal miscommunications. Elijah's been increasingly absent. He's been struggling to maintain direction, and some of our backers are understandably concerned. I froze. He wasn't defending me. He was erasing me. In that moment, I felt like the floor gave out beneath me. The host nodded clearly, feeding off the drama. So is it true there was a breach in investor transparency? Dylan didn't deny it. He just leaned back, let out a heavy sigh and said, "Let's just say not everyone on the team was pulling their weight." I felt sick. This was being broadcast live all across the country. Hell, probably all across YouTube by now. And the worst part? He sounded calm, confident, like he'd been rehearsing this for weeks. I opened Reddit half out of instinct. Big mistake. There it was, front page of r/startups. Crypto king implodes, Elijah Tran MIA. While co-founder tries to salvage what's left. Hundreds of comments, people speculating. I'd been ousted. Others saying I was having a breakdown. Some said I deserved it, that I'd flown too close to the sun. There were memes, photoshopped pictures of me lying in a hammock while my company burned in the background. One of them had over 10,000 upvotes. It's weird. You can handle strangers doubting you, even mocking you. But when your own partner, the one you built everything with, turns you into the fall guy, it changes something in you. Breaks something that doesn't grow back the same way. I didn't answer my phone for the rest of the day. It buzzed nonstop. Investors, journalists, even old classmates suddenly checking in. Dylan sent a text that evening. "We'll get through this." Had to say what I had to say for damage control. Hope you understand. Hope I understand. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I powered the phone off, and this time I didn't turn it back on. The next morning, I packed a single bag. I took my journal, 2 changes of clothes, and a stack of letters my grandfather had written me years ago. He used to own a cabin up in Bend, Oregon. After he passed, it sat there collecting dust, surrounded by pine trees in silence. That's where I went. I didn't tell anyone, not my mom, not my team, not even my landlord. I locked the apartment, left the key under the mat, and drove north until the signal bars vanished from my phone. I didn't even look back. The drive took nearly 10 hours. I didn't listen to music, didn't check the GPS. I just let the road carry me forward. When I finally arrived, it was almost midnight. Snow clung to the trees like they were exhaling. The cabin creaked as I opened the door, dry, cold air rushing past my face like a warning. But it felt safe, like maybe, just maybe, this was where the noise would stop. That first night in the cabin was the quietest moment I'd had in years. No calls, no comments, no calendar alerts. I sat by the window wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of cedar and stared into the woods. And for the first time since the betrayal, I let myself cry. Not the dramatic kind, not the loud kind, just slow, silent tears that slipped down my face as the weight of everything I'd lost finally landed on me. Trust, reputation, control, all gone. Because I believed someone had my back, because I made myself too available, too open, too exposed. You know what's funny? When you vanish from the world, most people don't even notice. A few will message, some will speculate, but no one really stops their life for you. And in that brutal truth, there's freedom. I stayed in that cabin for weeks. I didn't shave, barely ate. I slept on the couch and woke up whenever the light crept through the cracks in the roof. At night, I sat outside in the cold with a blanket wrapped around me and the stars overhead, brighter than I'd ever remembered. I kept thinking about Dylan, about how easy it was for him to spin a story, about how many times I'd covered for him, defended him, believed in him. But the more I sat in that silence, the more I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about me, the part of me that let it happen, the part of me that tied my worth to usefulness, that said yes to everything, that showed up to every meeting, that never said no, never set a boundary, never paused long enough to ask, what do I want? That was the beginning. The moment I stopped trying to fix what broke me and started trying to understand why I built it that way in the first place. I didn't expect the silence to be so loud. Out there in that old wooden cabin surrounded by towering evergreens and a sky that never rushed, I realized how addicted I'd been to noise. Not just the sound of people or traffic or apps buzzing, but the mental noise, the expectations, the deadlines, the image I had to maintain. I thought leaving San Francisco behind would feel like escaping, but at first it felt more like withdrawal. The first few days I'd reach for my phone without thinking, only to remember it was off and buried in the drawer. I'd hear phantom pings. My hands would twitch toward the charger like muscle memory. It was ridiculous. It was painful, and it was necessary. I started a routine mostly to stay sane. I'd wake with the light, no alarm. Just the slow creep of the sun slipping through the warped window panes. I'd make coffee on the stove, the kind that takes actual effort, and then I'd just sit. Sometimes in the corner chair by the fireplace, sometimes on the front steps, I'd sit and listen. To the trees creaking in the cold, to the occasional crack of ice shifting on the roof, to my own breath. That stillness was terrifying at first. But somewhere around day 6, something started to shift. I stopped checking the time. I stopped waiting for something to happen. And the silence started talking back. I don't mean that literally. No voices, no cosmic messages, just clarity. Thoughts that used to come in scattered bursts suddenly settled into patterns. Feelings I hadn't made space for in years started to rise. Like this one memory, me at 9 years old sitting on the front porch of our apartment in Oakland, waiting for my dad to show up. He was late. Again. I sat there for 2 hours pretending I wasn't hurt, telling myself he probably got stuck in traffic. My mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not saying anything. She didn't have to. Her silence said everything. I didn't cry that day, but I never forgot what it felt like, that invisible weight of not being chosen. And suddenly, sitting in that cabin all these years later, it hit me. Maybe that's why I was always available. Maybe I thought if I was always there for everyone, someone would finally stay for me. That realization hurt more than anything Dylan ever did, because Dylan was just a mirror. He showed me what I tolerated, what I excused, what I enabled. He was the symptom, but the sickness that ran deeper. After that, I started writing again. Not code, not business plans, just thoughts. Random, unfiltered, unpolished. At first, it was messy half sentences and disconnected phrases, but slowly the words started to form meaning. I wrote about the hustle, about the version of me that wore success like armor, about the nights I said yes when I meant no, about the moments I smiled in rooms where I didn't feel seen. And in those pages, I started to find something I hadn't felt in a long time. Myself. I also started walking no phone, no earbuds, just boots, breath, and trees. There was this one trail behind the cabin that led to a small clearing. Snow blanketed everything. It was quiet, untouched. And every time I stood there, I felt small, but not in a bad way. More like right-sized. Like maybe the world didn't need me to post every thought or prove my worth every hour. Maybe the world was doing just fine without me screaming into it. And for the first time, I wasn't offended by that. One morning, I woke up before dawn. The moon was still hanging low, casting silver over the frost. I stepped outside in my flannel and jeans, breath clouding in front of me. And then I did something that felt strange, even silly. I whispered, "Thank you," to what I don't know, the trees, the sound, the quiet. To myself, maybe, because I was starting to see it. This stillness wasn't a punishment. It was a reset. And slowly I was rebuilding my sense of self. Not the version the internet wanted. Not the guy investors could pitch. Just me. It's funny, we spend so much time online chasing connection, but I'd never felt more connected than I did in those moments of total solitude. No likes, no comments. Just me. My breath, the snow, and the knowledge that I was enough, without a platform telling me so. I was starting to reclaim something I'd forgotten how to feel. Self-worth, not the kind you get from applause or press features. The kind that hums quietly inside you when you realize you don't need to be seen to matter. A few days later, I found a note my grandfather had left in the cabin. It was taped to the inside of a cabinet, folded in half and yellowed with age. In his handwriting it said, "Silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence deep enough to echo." I stood there holding that paper, heart pounding. It was like he'd written it for me, like somehow he knew that one day I'd come here not to hide but to hear myself again. And in that moment I understood something. The world had been loud, but I had let it drown me. Now I was finally learning how to listen not to them, but to me. That winter in Oregon didn't fix me. It didn't erase the betrayal or undo the years I spent overextending myself, but it gave me space. It gave me quiet. And in that quiet, I began to rebuild. Not louder, but truer. I didn't plan to come back. Not really, I told myself. I was done with that world, with panels, with pitch decks, with curated bios, and LinkedIn humble brags. But sometimes life calls you back, not with noise, but with a whisper you can't ignore. It started with a single email. Subject line, low-key tech summit, no press, no pressure, just brains. It was from an old investor, Jillian Montes, one of the few people who never pulled out during the collapse. She never emailed me after the fallout, never asked questions, never took sides. Just sent me this note. If you feel like stepping back into the room, this one won't be like the others. At first, I left it unread. For weeks, then one snowy night, I stared at it again. Still unopened, still glowing quietly in the inbox like a door left slightly ajar. And for reasons I still can't explain, I clicked reply. 2 weeks later, I was flying into LAX, window seat hoodie pulled over my head. I didn't post, didn't announce it, didn't even bring my laptop. The event was hosted in a sleek glass-walled boutique venue in Beverly Hills. Nothing flashy, but everything intentional. Just a small group of entrepreneurs, thinkers, coders, and founders gathered to share real ideas without the noise of a hashtag. When I walked in, no one recognized me at first. I'd cut my hair, trimmed my beard, lost 10 pounds, and carried no tech gear. Just a leather notebook, a quiet walk, and a stare that didn't need to prove anything anymore. I found a seat in the back corner of the room. No name tag, no spotlight, and still the whispers started. One guy leaned over and said to the person next to him, "Is that Elijah Tran?" Another followed, "No way." I thought he ghosted the whole industry. And yet I said nothing because I'd learned something out in that cabin. When your presence is scarce, your absence becomes a myth, and myths don't have to speak to be felt. The panel started 2 founders, 1 moderator, and a spot left open. Jillian took the mic and smiled like she knew exactly what she was doing. Before we begin, she said, "We have a surprise." I felt every eye in the room shift toward me. I didn't move. Then she added, "If he's willing, we'd love to hear a few thoughts from someone who redefined what it means to not be available." And just like that, I was on my feet. I didn't rehearse, didn't plan. But I walked to the stage anyway, slowly, calmly, like a man who'd learned how to measure his presence. I stood at the mic. No slides, no pitch, just breath and truth, I said. For most of my life, I thought the louder I was, the more I'd matter. The more I posted, showed up, stayed reachable, the more valuable I'd be. But the truth is, noise doesn't equal worth. And being everywhere doesn't make you irreplaceable. It makes you disposable. The room went silent, so I kept going. I used to fear being forgotten, but I've learned true value isn't built in visibility. It's built in intentionality. In choosing when to show up and why. Silence doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes it means you've finally been found. No applause. Not at first, just that kind of stillness that settles when people are actually listening. Afterward, I slipped away before the cocktail hour. No interviews, no press photos. But on my way out, someone tapped me on the shoulder. A junior founder, probably mid-20s, hoodie zipped to his chin, eyes wide. He said, "Man, I thought I had to be loud to matter. But what you said, it hit. Like deep, I didn't say much, just nodded and said, start small. Speak when it counts." Then I walked into the LA night, cool breeze against my face, a calm I didn't recognize from the man I used to be. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from a firm that had dropped me last year. "Hey, Elijah, not sure what you're working on these days, but if you ever want to talk, we'd love to explore backing you again." I didn't return the call, not because I was being arrogant, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing. Something happens when you stop broadcasting your every move. People lean in, they wonder, they reflect, and in that mystery, something powerful is born. A new kind of respect that can't be demanded, only earned. That's the thing about strategic silence. It doesn't shout, it shifts. It tilts the energy in the room without saying a word. A week later, an old article about me resurfaced on LinkedIn. The comments this time weren't jokes or jabs, they were questions. What's Elijah up to now? Where did he go? Whatever space he's in, it's working. I smiled reading them, not because I needed the attention, but because I didn't. That right there was the difference. I wasn't seeking validation anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next ping, the next invite, the next reminder that I mattered because I'd spent enough time in the quiet to remember. My voice has weight, my absence has meaning, and my presence is no longer something I give away for free. I used to believe that success was about being remembered by everyone, being seen, being known, being everywhere. But now I know it's not about how many people remember you, it's about who remembers you. And why? It's been almost a year since that tech summit in Beverly Hills. I haven't taken another stage, haven't posted anything, no interviews, no brand partnerships, no new project launch, carousel posts. Instead, I bought a second-hand Tesla Model 3, packed what little I still owned and started driving. Up the coast, down the coast. No destination, no agenda. Just the road, the ocean, and a quiet I've grown to trust. Most days I journal, sometimes by the cliffs of Big Sur, sometimes parked under the stars on the Pacific Coast Highway. My notebook's worn now, the pages warped by salt air and coffee stains, but every page is mine, my words, my rhythm, no comments, no shares, just presence, real, full-grounded presence. I didn't go back to the startup world. I had offers, huge ones, people throwing money like it was monopoly cash. One VC firm even dangled a $20 million term sheet in front of me for a comeback company. They wanted to slap my face on a press release, frame it as redemption, brand it as resilience. I politely declined, because real resilience isn't about bouncing back louder, it's about bouncing back wiser. Instead, I started something no one saw coming. A foundation, no name on it, no founder's photo, just quiet, consistent. Support, we mentor first-gen college students from underserved communities who want to break into tech, but not lose themselves in the process. One of those students, Jada, was a 17-year-old coder from East Oakland, smart sharp, already building apps in her bedroom. We met at a local workshop I attended anonymously. She asked a question about debugging that reminded me of me at that age, hungry for knowledge, craving guidance. I offered to review her project code over Zoom. She had no idea who I was, just thought I was some retired dev with time on his hands. 6 months later, she got into MIT, and in her blog post, she wrote, "There was this guy. Quiet, always asked more questions than he answered, but the space he gave me, that changed everything." I read those words in my car one night, parked by the cliffs outside Santa Cruz, waves crashing below, moon rising above. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not pride, but peace, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that settles. Legacy, I've learned, isn't built in viral moments. It's built in intentional ones. When you choose to give without asking for credit, when you leave room for others to grow without filling the silence with your ego, when you understand that being scarce makes your presence matter. I still get messages now and then from old colleagues, from press people, from strangers who say, "You disappeared." Why, sometimes I answer. Most times I don't. Not out of spite, but because not every version of you owes an explanation. Some stories are meant to be lived, not live streamed. Some answers belong in silence. I still think about Dylan. Sometimes I forgave him. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry that weight anymore. Betrayal is loud, it echoes. But forgiveness, that's the quiet that follows when the storm finally clears. A few months ago, I got coffee with Jillian the investor, who invited me back into the world when I wasn't sure I belonged in it anymore. She smiled and asked, "So what's next?" I told her, "More quiet." She laughed. "Only you could make that sound like a power move." I just shrugged and said, "It is, because power isn't in how loud you speak. It's in how deeply your absence is felt when you leave the room." Now I live light, one bag, one journal, one mission: to be intentional with my time, to protect my energy like the sacred, non-renewable resource that it is, to be available to the few who truly see me, and invisible to the ones who only saw what I could give them. Every now and then I write this phrase at the top of a new journal page: presence over performance. It reminds me of the man I used to be, and the man I never want to be again. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you're drowning in expectations, constantly showing up but never really seen, let me say this to you softly but clearly. You are allowed to disappear. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to become scarce, not out of fear, but out of love for your own peace, your own voice, your own legacy, because your worth is not in your availability, it's in your authenticity. And when you finally stop chasing visibility, that's when you'll truly be seen.